The old lady won't even notice until spring. I heard those exact words come out of my daughter's mouth while I stood holding my mug of tea outside her half-open bedroom door. Sloane was on the phone upstairs, laughing softly as she confirmed reservations for my lakefront cabin. I didn't barge into the room. I didn't yell. And I didn't demand an explanation. I just stood there, feeling a deep, quiet resolve settle into my chest. I smiled in the dim light of the hallway. Because if there's one thing I've learned in my 64 years, it's that I am not a helpless woman. My name is Sylvia Hawthorne. I've been a widow for 5 years, and I never confuse patience with submission. Sloane and her husband, Declan, had been living on the second floor of my house for almost 2 years. The initial excuse was that they were saving up for a down payment on their own place. As a mother, it seemed like a fair deal. I gave them space, privacy, and never charged them a dime in rent. But constant generosity is often mistaken for a sense of entitlement. Over the last few months, Sloane had started asking for the keys to the cabin for quiet weekend getaways. I'd hand them over without a second thought. Now, listening to her break down how she'd hiked up the nightly rates for New Year's Eve. All those little requests took on a sickening new meaning. She wasn't just borrowing my place, she had turned it into her own personal side hustle. Assuming my age made me blind to her scheming, I padded softly back down to the kitchen. I washed my mug, wiped down the granite counter, and sat at the dining room table. I wasn't going to cry. The sting of betrayal is sharp, but I found that calculated action is the best antidote. Sloane thought she had all the cards because I had handed them to her out of love. Tomorrow, the rules of the game were changing. What would she do when her picture-perfect setup crumbled to pieces without anyone even raising their voice? By daybreak, the house was still wrapped in a heavy silence. I brewed a pot of dark, strong coffee just the way I like it, and sat down at my laptop. I had slept like a baby the night before. There wasn't an ounce of guilt in my conscience, just crystal clear certainty about my next moves. Sloane and Declan came down for breakfast around 9. She was in her usual athleisure wear, looking completely at ease, like the whole world revolved around her. "Morning, Mom," she chimed in, pouring herself some juice. "I'm doing a massive grocery haul for dinner tonight. I'll just use the blue card. Sound good?" The blue card was a credit card linked to my account that I had given her a year ago for household emergencies. Lately, her emergencies seemed to include expensive wine and trips to the salon. "That won't be possible," I replied, turning the page of my book without looking up. "Why not?" she asked, her glass stopping halfway to her mouth. "I canceled it this morning. I've decided to reorganize my personal finances." Declan let out a slight cough and stared hard at his plate. Sloane frowned, clearly thrown off balance. She wasn't used to hearing a flat-out no, especially not delivered so casually. But I was banking on it for today. "We pitch in around here too, you know. You're more than welcome to use your own cards for your expenses," I suggested, finally looking up to lock eyes with her. "You guys have been saving up for 2 solid years now, right? I'm sure one grocery run won't tank your monthly budget." I didn't wait for her to respond. I got up, took my mug, and walked out into the garden. Cutting off the cash flow was just step 1. The real issue was miles away, tucked between the pine trees and the freezing lake water. How long would it take for her to realize her secret little empire was about to be shut down? That afternoon, while Sloane and Declan were at their respective jobs, I hopped in my car and drove up to the cabin. The drive up into the mountains had always been my thinking time, but today, I just enjoyed the scenery. The property looked exactly as I remembered it. surrounded by towering cedars with the wooden dock stretching out over the dark water. The second I walked in with my old key, though, I noticed the changes. Sloane had taken down my family photos in the hallway. In their place hung cheap, generic wall art. The handmade Afghans my mother had knitted were gone, replaced by thin, easily washable white duvets. She had stripped the soul out of my personal sanctuary and turned it into a sterile Airbnb. I didn't waste time mourning it. I marched out to the tool shed and grabbed a couple of heavy-duty cardboard boxes, moving methodically. I started packing up everything that wasn't mine. The brand new sheets, the fancy pod coffee maker, the little welcome baskets loaded with miniature soaps. I boxed up every last bit of it. Then I called Mac, the local locksmith, a man of few words who I'd known for decades. He pulled up in his beat-up truck less than half an hour later. "Afternoon, Mrs. Hawthorne." The usual, "All of them, please. Mac. Front door, back door, and the padlock on the main gate." I sat on the wooden porch and watched him work. There was something incredibly soothing about the sound of old metal being swapped out for new. Every fresh screw felt like a boundary being put back into place. I paid him in cash, thanked him, and dropped the heavy new set of keys into the bottom of my purse. Before leaving, I stacked Sloane's boxes in the corner of the outdoor shed and locked it up tight. My house was mine again. I wondered what kind of excuse my daughter would spin when she found out her golden ticket didn't unlock a single door anymore. The next few days back in the city were almost comically normal. Sloane gave me the cold shoulder, clearly stinging from the credit card shutoff, and barely managed a stiff "good morning." I played it perfectly polite, watching out of the corner of my eye as her phone blew up with notifications. I knew the New Year's Eve long weekend was fast approaching the date she had locked in her most lucrative booking yet. On Thursday night, I started packing my bags. Sloane bumped into me in the hallway as I was rolling a small suitcase toward the front door. Her eyes darted to my luggage, and I could practically see the gears grinding in her head as panic set in. "Are you going on a trip?" she asked, trying way too hard to sound casual. "I am. I'm heading up to the cabin for the long weekend. I could use some fresh air." The color completely drained from her face. Her eyes went wide. "You can't go up there," she blurted out, her voice pitching up an octave. I turned around slowly, resting both hands on the handle of my suitcase. "I can't go to my own house." "Why on earth not?" She swallowed hard, scrambling for a lifeline. "It's just, I was actually going to ask for the keys. Declan and I wanted to go. We already bought groceries and everything. It was supposed to be a surprise, to get you the house to yourself so you could relax." I smiled. It was a genuine smile, born entirely out of sheer fascination at her ability to lie straight to my face without blinking. "What a thoughtful gesture," I murmured. "But my mind is made up. Maybe you two can find a nice bed and breakfast instead. You have your savings, after all." I opened the front door and stepped out toward the garage, leaving her frozen in the hallway. As I started the car, I glanced back and saw her frantically dialing a number on her phone, her fingers trembling. How was she going to handle the strangers who were about to show up to a house already occupied by its rightful owner? Friday dawned cold and bright at the lake. I woke up early, got a fire going in the fireplace, and brewed a cup of chamomile tea. I set myself up in the armchair by the front window, which gave me a perfect view of the main driveway gate. I hadn't turned my cell phone on all day. I had zero interest in fielding the panicked calls I knew Sloane was trying to make. Around 2 in the afternoon, a silver SUV pulled up to the iron gate. A young couple piled out, along with 2 little kids. The man walked up to the gate, hunting for the lockbox where Sloan usually stashed the keys. He punched in a code. Once, twice, 3 times. I threw on a light cardigan and crunched down the gravel path toward them. The man looked relieved but confused as I approached. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called out through the bars. "I think we got the wrong code. We rented this cabin for the holiday weekend." I stopped a few feet from the gate, keeping my posture tall and perfectly calm. "Good afternoon. I'm afraid there's been a massive misunderstanding. This is my private property, and I do not rent it out to anyone under any circumstances." The woman stepped out of the car, clutching her phone, looking stressed. "But we have a confirmation we paid up front to someone named Sloan." I nodded slowly, putting on an expression of polite sympathy. "I am so incredibly sorry. Sloan has absolutely no authorization to list this place, nor does she even have keys to the property. I strongly suggest you contact her immediately and demand a full refund." They looked at each other, caught between anger and sheer exhaustion. They didn't argue with me. My calm presence behind a locked, heavy iron gate made it pretty clear who the real owner was. I watched them climb back into the SUV and start furiously dialing their phones. I walked back to my rocking chair by the fire. It was only a matter of time now. How long until my daughter showed up in person? It took barely 3 hours. The sun was just starting to dip behind the mountains, turning the lake water a deep copper, when Sloan and Declan's car came tearing down the dirt road, slamming on the brakes. They skidded to a halt in front of the locked gate. Sloan threw her door open and stormed out. She was livid, her face flushed with indignation. She marched right up to the iron bars and rattled them with both hands. "Mom, open the gate!" she screamed. I stepped out onto the porch, but didn't bother going down the stairs. I just stood there, hands tucked into my coat pockets, watching her from a distance. "The keys aren't working." "Somebody changed the padlock," she yelled, her voice shattering the quiet of the woods. I had guests coming today, people who paid me good money. "The locksmith did stellar work, from the looks of it," I replied, my tone so flat I sounded almost bored. Declan climbed out of the passenger side, looking miserable. He rubbed the back of his neck, unable to even look me in the eye. Sloan stared at me, and for a split second, her rage gave way to pure bewilderment. You knew," she stammered, "that you were renting out my house behind my back, profiting off my property while living rent-free under my roof? Yes." "Sloan." "I knew. We upgraded things," she tried to defend herself, gripping the bars. "They're demanding a refund. My accounts are going to get penalized." I walked slowly to the side of the porch, grabbed the first of the heavy cardboard boxes packed with her cheap sheets and coffee pods, and hauled it down the path. I unlocked the new padlock, slid the box through the opening onto the dirt outside my property line, and snapped the lock shut again. "Your things," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "Refunds and penalties sound like business problems, not mine." I turned on my heel and headed back to the house. Would she finally realize that a mother's patience isn't a bottomless well? "You can't do this to me." Sloane's shriek cut through the crisp air. "That's over $1,200 in refunds." I stopped halfway up the gravel path, turned slightly, and met her gaze. There was no mockery on my face, but there wasn't any pity, either. Just an icy calm that had taken me years to build. "I haven't done anything to you, Sloan. You made choices behind my back, and now you are managing the consequences of your own actions. That's how adult life works." Declan, who had been hovering quietly by the car, finally spoke up. Mrs. Hawthorne, maybe we could go inside and talk about this. It's freezing out here. There's nothing to discuss. Declan, I answered firmly. And my home isn't the place to hash out financial messes that have nothing to do with me. You have a long drive back to the city. I highly recommend you hit the road before it gets pitch dark. I went inside and closed the heavy front door, making sure the deadbolt clicked loudly into place. Through the window, I watched Sloane kick the cardboard box before begrudgingly picking it up. Tears of pure frustration in her eyes. They got back in the car and peeled out, leaving behind nothing but a cloud of dust and a glorious silence. That night, I had a hot bowl of soup and read a few chapters of a novel. My chest felt lighter than it had in ages. I hadn't needed to make a scene or publicly humiliate anyone. I had reclaimed my territory simply by standing my ground and exercising my rights. The rest of the weekend was incredibly peaceful. On Sunday afternoon, I packed up my things to head back to Seattle. I couldn't help but wonder what the vibe would be when I walked through the front door. I pulled into my driveway Monday around noon. The house was dead quiet. I dropped my bags in my room and made some lunch. Around 6 that evening, I heard the front door open. Sloane and Declan's footsteps echoed in the hallway. Slow, dragging steps. I was sitting in the living room, working on some embroidery, when they appeared in the doorway. Sloane had dark circles under her eyes, her face tight. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a sullen resentment she was failing to hide. "Hey," I said, not looking up from my hoop. Neither of them returned the greeting. Sloane flopped onto the sofa across from me and stared. "I had to drain 2 months of savings to cover the cancellation fees," she said, her voice shaking slightly as she fished for a reaction. "Are you happy now?" I pushed the needle through the fabric and set the hoop aside. "I'm neither happy nor sad about your finances, Sloane. Like I told you at the lake, that's your responsibility. What I am interested in is the future of this house." They both tensed up instantly. Declan crossed his arms, clearly bracing for impact. "I've decided to take up oil painting again," I announced in a casual, conversational tone, as if we were discussing the weather. "The natural light on the second floor is perfect for a studio. I'm going to need the space empty." Sloane let out a short, bitter laugh. "Are you kicking us out over a sudden urge to paint? I am letting you know that I need my house back. You have exactly 30 days to find a place and move out. You've been saving up for 2 solid years with 0 rent. You should have more than enough for a very nice security deposit." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rehash the drama at the cabin. The message was crystal clear and final. Would they be able to leave with their dignity intact? Or would they try to cling to something that was no longer theirs? The next 29 days were a masterclass in silent tension. A couple of times, Sloane tried her hand at emotional manipulation. She'd leave old family photos scattered on the kitchen counter or sigh dramatically while clearing the dinner plates. I just politely nudged the photos aside to set down my tea and wished her a good night. Once boundaries are drawn, you don't negotiate them away over a heavy sigh. When playing the victim didn't pan out, the frantic rush began. Every weekend, I'd hear them thumping up and down the stairs, shuffling boxes and taping up cartons. Declan actually looked relieved, as if he knew deep down this whole setup had been unsustainable and was just tired of his wife's greed. I bumped into him in the hallway one afternoon while he was carrying a TV. "We found an apartment downtown," he muttered, pausing for a second. "We're moving out first thing this Saturday." I nodded calmly. "I hope everything goes well for you guys in your new place." Declan. Saturday morning. a small U-Haul parked out front. I watched the whole production from my bedroom window while watering my plants. I didn't go down to supervise, and I didn't interfere. By 4 o'clock, the truck's engine rumbled to life. Sloane lingered on the front porch for a moment, looking back at the house. Her expression was a messy mix of wounded pride and defeat. She didn't come upstairs to say goodbye, and I didn't go down to demand a fake, hypocritical hug that neither of us wanted. We had crossed a line, and we both knew it. I heard the front door click shut with a definitive thud. I wondered what it would feel like to walk those halls now that they were entirely mine again. I took the stairs one by one. The second floor was completely empty, smelling faintly of stirred-up dust and cardboard. The curtains were wide open, letting in the raw, golden afternoon light. I walked through the vacant rooms. My chest wasn't heavy with nostalgia. It was filled with an immense, expansive relief. The house could finally breathe again. And so could I. That night, I ordered takeout from my favorite Thai place and poured myself a glass of wine. I sat in my living room, soaking in the absolute quiet. Nobody was going to stomp around heavily above my head. Nobody was going to use my things without asking. And nobody was going to treat me like an invisible woman in my own home. The very next day, I called some painters. It wasn't a bluff. I really did buy canvases and an easel. Sloane didn't call over the next few weeks, and I didn't reach out either. The love you have for a child doesn't vanish, but it does learn to transform. Sometimes, the biggest act of love is letting them face the harsh realities of the world without being their permanent safety net. When spring rolled around, exactly as I had planned, I headed back up to the cabin. The ice on the lake had thawed, and the water was sparkling under the sun. I sat out on the wooden dock with a steaming mug of coffee, watching the ducks glide across the glassy surface. Everything was exactly where it belonged. Nobody had remodeled a single thing behind my back. It was all mine, in the most profound and peaceful sense of the word. I took a sip of my coffee, smiled into the chilly breeze, and knew with absolute certainty that the old lady would always notice. If there's one thing I've taken away from all of this, it's not how to be harder or more distant. It's understanding that unconditional love should never be confused with infinite self-sacrifice. So often, just to keep the peace, we chip away at our own comfort and space, telling ourselves that's just what family does, or that's what mothers do. But protecting what is yours, your peace of mind, your assets, and your right to choose isn't selfish. It's an emotional necessity. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you stop loving your kids. It means you respect yourself enough not to let anyone turn you into a silent spectator in your own life. In the end, true strength isn't found in screaming matches or exhausting arguments. It's found in the quiet calm of making firm decisions and protecting your own sanctuary.